Narayanam namaskritam naram chaiva narottamam devim sarasatim vyasam tato jayodir nashna prayasho bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavate tamashoki bhaktir bhavati naishtiki Nigama kapaduru garitam param shukam makaramita jyotisamitam pibata bhagavata marshamaru mahora shivakam Krishna swadama bhagavate dharmakari shara karo nashtari samishra karana pradana vidaham Amavita Pradabhishani Krishna Mahasamuni Yaramiva Sarvam Krishna Vanamusanti Nanyataham Tatpasaranam Charanam Bhushamahare Bhajana Pakpatopathet Yatakava Parubane Kovartatam Bhajatam Shadamataham Om Maganati Maranda Shaganangana Sarakya Chaksurin Miritam Yana Tajmai Sigurve Nama Sitanimanov Vistam Stapitam Yana Bhutare Sayam Rupakaramayam Darati Saparantikam Vandeham Siguru Siyata Parikamanam Shigaran Vaishnavam Sa Siyurupam Sagaram Sahagana Rakanatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parejana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Harita Shivishakan Vitam Sam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinu Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kantara Rikantana Mostude Jayatam Surito Pango Mamadir Madir Giti Matsavasha Param Bhoja Radha Madan Mohanam Sriman Rasa Rasa Rambi Vamsi Bada Karsan Vinaya Siddhu Gopri Gopinata Sri Saram Divyadvindaranya Kapadurvara Srimad Ratnagara Srimad Sanasto Sri Sri Radha Shila Govindari Prastadavi Seva Manushmarami Namam Vishnu Paraya Krishna Pasaya Bhutare Shrimati Bhakti Paranta Shami Dhanamane Namaste Sarasati Deva Guruvani Pachani Nirvishesa Sanyavadi Praskita Desarani Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Good morning, happy Independence Day. Let's hope that we can get ourselves independent from death. Remember when Prabhupada met his spiritual master the first time, he argued in favor of Gandhiism, in favor of India first achieving its independence from Britain before preaching the Bhagavad all over the world. Prabhupada's thought was that as an independent nation, India would have a lot more leverage, a better platform with which to spread the message of Krishna consciousness. Bhakti Siddhanta Prabhupada says, my Guru Maharaj defeated me. He said the urgency of Krishna consciousness is such that it cannot wait for any political arrangements. So on this Independence Day, our hope is to achieve not independence from Britain or some colonial power, but independence from Janmam Nitu Jaravirya, birth, death, disease, and old age. And to that purpose, last Sunday or last night's talk was declaring our dependence on God. By declaring your dependence on God, you get independence from the ropes, the bondage of the modes of material nature. Yagnarto kamanonyata lokayam taratam kamaikantya mukta sangha parambhajat. Mukta sangha means independence from birth, death, disease, and old age. And that's what Krishna consciousness is all about. In Australia, Prabhupada was interviewed by a reporter one time. The reporter said, there are so many, this is in the 70s, there are so many groups taking to the streets, anti-Vietnam War, civil rights movement. And just Hare Krishnas are also in the streets. So what are you protesting? Some groups are protesting Vietnam War, some groups are protesting racial discrimination. So you guys are also out there with everybody else. So what are you protesting? Prabhupada said, we are protesting death. We want independence from death. And so that is our declaration today. By declaring our dependence on God, He can bring about such arrangement that we get independence from death. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, 14th verse, Devi Hashigunami Matambaya Daratya Mameva Yupravadati Mayam Tim Haranti Te. This material nature is very difficult to overcome. Material nature's got her foot on our neck, just like the British once had its foot on the neck of India. But by the grace of the Lord, material nature can be called off. The Lord just has to say a word or even glance, and material nature backs off and releases the chains with which He holds us. That's our message here on Monday, July 4th, Independence Day. Good morning, Govinda Dev. Good morning, Malini Preeti from all the way across the globe. Govinda Raj, Krishna Das, thanks for joining us. Terry, a couple of those who don't regularly join us, we're happy to have you on board. We're revisiting this verse. It's the 17th verse in the 5th chapter of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Chakva Shardanam Charanam Bhujam Hare Bhajana Pakvatapatyati Kovart Yatra Kava Babara Vudamishi Kovarta Pambajatam Shadharmatam. Says, one who has forsaken his material occupation to engage in the devotional service of the Lord may sometimes fall down while in an immature stage, yet there is no danger of being unsuccessful. On the other hand, a devotee, though fully engaged in occupational duties, a non-devotee, though fully engaged in occupational duties, does not gain anything. It means even a step, even a baby step towards ultimate independence of the soul from material bondage, from birth, death, disease, and old age. Even taking one feeble step in that direction during the course of one's lifetime, that alone makes your life successful. On the other hand, if you take thousands and thousands of steps in terms of diligence with respect to family, friends, and country, still, paravabash tavada bodha jato yavagna jinashu atantadvam, because you have missed totally the purpose of the human form of life and accepted the same sort of duties and occupational engagements as the animals, making elaborate arrangements for eating, sleeping, mating, defending, then there's no artha, there's no ultimate profit from having lived this human form of life. Therefore, the conclusion of Rishabh Maharaj is parabhavash tavadabhota. Even if you're perfect in all of your material temporal duties, your life is a life of defeat because you failed to make progress towards liberation, ultimate freedom from bondage. It says, what is the process for achieving liberation? It starts at home, starts on the most elemental level. We all have a tongue. Women say 30,000 words a day on average. Men say 25,000 words a day on average. Men and women, as far as I don't know the statistics, but they eat on the average 2.5 or 3 meals a day. So the two functions of the tongue are talking and eating. They occupy a major part of our time and energy. So if you dedicate your eating and your talking, make them God-centered, then that's going to get you well on your way back to home, back to God. So powerful is the process of using your tongue to vibrate the names of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, and taking consecrated vegetarian food offered to the Lord. But these two simple processes, which we do every day and which we can easily dovetail in the service of the Lord, will be more than enough to elevate someone to the highest platform of transcendence, irrespective of where you started in life, irrespective of what sort of a birth or parentage you had. The process of taking prasadam, chanting the holy names of the Lord, is more than sufficient to counteract any shortcomings, any shortfalls, and take one to the highest platform of transcendence. This is confirmed in the 19th verse, first chapter of the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Sakarin mana Krishna parara vindayor nasevitam tadguniriha tatiya vanash pashabridashirbatab shabni bishanti chirna nishkrita. Says Sakrin mana Krishna parara vindaya, having just once heartfeltedly cried out for the Lord, Krishna, help, I'm in over my head in this vast ocean of birth, death, disease, and old age. I surrender unto you. Even once having wholeheartedly made that appeal of surrender, and maybe one later on backtracked or, lost some ground, but just having once accepted the true method of atonement, which is to grasp the lotus feet of the Lord. If you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, you can't swim your way out of trouble. You can't swim your way out of trouble. And if you're in ignorance and if you're unaware of the absolute truth and His saving grace, You can't take shelter of politicians, business zions, leaders, teachers, even parents, who themselves are ignorant of the same fact. They're ignorant of the saving grace of the Lord. If you're in the ocean, you're in a bad shape. But then if you mistakenly take a stone boat, if you try to board a stone boat and put your faith in that stone boat to get you out of trouble, to get you safely to shore, then you're even more doomed than you were before. So, unfortunately, people have a tendency to follow blind leaders. They themselves are blind. They follow blind leaders. So that's like being in the middle of the ocean and, as a remedy, getting into a stone boat to get out of that ocean. And the stone boat is just going to go right to the bottom. So political leaders, businessmen, even teachers and parents who are devoid of Atma Tattva, devoid of knowledge of the absolute truth, they're not in any way, shape, or form capable of saving us, of assisting us with our major number one problem. It's the fact that we're in this ocean of birth and death, extremely dangerous, precarious position. But when you call out to Krishna, Ata Sri Krishna Navadi, Sevan Mukhi Jivido, Shayameva Sparadira. Heartfeltedly, Prabhupada always said we should chant heartfeltedly as one who is in trouble. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Even if you have a good position, good family, good house, good job, everything's good, you should still feel, I'm in trouble, I'm in danger. That complacent mood, the complacent attitude, I go to church, I tithe, I have a good attendance record, I'm well respected in the community, I have a good income, even though you think you have your ducks all lined up and you're pretty well off, that is only a relative assumption. It means you're only a little better than those to the right of you and to the left of you. But the problem is that you're all dropped, plopped into the middle of the ocean. It's a vast ocean. And you cannot, on your own power, get out of it. Whether you're in the material estimation, well situated, well placed, elevated, or whether you're materially bereft, doesn't matter. We're all in the same stone boat in the middle of the ocean. Everyone, irrespective of their relative material talents and abilities and position in society, should feel themselves desperately in need of the help of the Lord. So it says, anyone, Sakri Mana Krishna Parara Vindai or Niveshitam Tad Gunera Geraha, Nate Yama Pasabritis Shabatam Shrapnahi Pasanti Tirna. Yama refers to Yamaraj, the Lord of Death. He comes either personally or he sends his associates, the Yamadutas, to drag sinful, non-God conscious people off for punishment at the time of death. Yet he instructs his associates, the Yamadutas, do not approach those who have even once chanted heartfeltedly the names of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. He gives them a pass. It is said, Shrapnehi Pashanti Vichirna Niskrita. What to speak of seeing the associates of Yamaraj at the time of death. Those who have chanted the name of Krishna, they do not even see Yamaraj or his associates, even in dreams. Why? Because a single heartfelt recitation of chanting Hare Krishna absolves one of more sins than one is able to commit. Elsewhere in the sixth canto is the canto that deals specifically with the issue of atonement. If you're sick, then you have to give up eating and drinking those things that made you sick in the first place. You cannot continue taking in the very same items that brought you to a disease condition in the first place. If we're suffering in this material world, if we're bound head and foot by the modes of material nature, you cannot continue to act for sense gratification. You have to counteract the sins, the symptoms of your disease. If you have a fever, you have to some or other cool your body off and get rid of the fever. If you have a cough, you have to take gargle. You have to try to take nasal sprays, oregano and things to kill the viruses that might be in your nasal passages. If you continue to provide a host for viruses and bacteria while you're sick and miserable and feeling symptoms, then those symptoms will not only not abate, but they will get worse and worse. So atonement means addressing the symptoms of your disease, relieving the miserable conditions, so that you can then continue about your performance of devotional service. Tajmai paraivashu yapapa nishkuto yateda mitnur abhipatyamananam doshasha dishtu guru lagan medital bashik chikitsa mudam ninit. It is said that we got this current material body with all of the concomitant pains and pleasures. Some people, when they're born, they have a cellular composition which dictates that at the age of 38, they're going to get cancer. Some people are born, and with that birth comes diabetes at a certain age, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome. These things we inherit from the bad choices that we made in our past life. So if this body is a result of our bad choices in the past life, then we should adopt the process of atonement, just like a diseased person adopts medicine and avoids those foods which cause the disease in order to get relief from suffering. So similarly, one must incorporate the process of atonement, such as eating prasadam, chanting Hare Krishna, getting up early, reading scriptures, purifying one's consciousness in order to relieve one from the gravity of sins from which one is suffering at the present moment. The problem is that save and except for Krishna-centered activities, giving in charity, church attendance, learning scriptures, donating, performing yoga, asceticism, none of these things root out the essential original cause of sinful activities. It is said in the 9th verse of the first chapter of 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Prashant's on board now, supplying us the quotes and the links to those quotes. Also, Shiksha Stakam has also come through with a link to the stone boat quote. Thank you both for that contribution. Here's one more for you. See who can come up with this one the fastest, okay? Well, I already gave you the verse. Justashuta bimyatpapam gyanamatmira karotu bhuya vivashva priyashitam arto kartam. Just as an aside, I remember when Prabhupada was on the planet, we so much wanted to be like him. Devotees were mad after being like Prabhupada. Whatever he had, we wanted it. Prabhupada was an elderly man. He walked with a cane. So some of his 20-year-old disciples, I remember in Australia, we had a leader named Mohanananda. He was like 22, 23 years old. So he so much wanted to be like Prabhupada. Wherever he went, he used a cane. The Prabhupada imitation mentality was so strong that 20-year-olds using a cane. And one thing Prabhupada used to do, because he was elderly, and the older you get, the more mucus comes up into your throat and your passageways. So Prabhupada, if you listen to lectures of Prabhupada, Prabhupada would clear his throat periodically. Dehi no shmi nyata dehi komaram yavaram jara tata dehantara prapya diristadadmo. As the embodied soul, justashutam yatpapam jnanam apmanohitam karotabu prayasitamaitopitam. So that's what happens. I'm 74. So my throat gets choked up. Didn't happen when I was 24 or 34 or 44, even 64, but I have to counteract my throat getting choked up with some liquid here and some cough drops. But it's so funny that back in the 70s, 20-year-old Prabhupada disciples, I can remember them giving clocks and clearing their throats every 5 seconds because Prabhupada, a 70-year-old man, cleared his throat. They had to be like Prabhupada in every detail. So they would also clear their throats every few seconds. So now I'm at the point where I'm also having to clear my throat frequently. But I assure you, that is not artificial. That is not imitation. That is simply because of the fact that I have arrived physically at that point, comparable to that point at which Prabhupada was having to repeatedly clear his throat. But that's an aside. The meaning of this verse is we know that performing sinful acts, meeting illicit sex, intoxication, we know they're not good for us. We know they're injurious to our spiritual and physical health. Why? Drishta Shudmim. Because we've heard about it, isn't it? We've read books. Our parents have cautioned us. Our teachers have given us ample good advice. Our minister, when we go to church, when we read scriptures, even in many cases, mundane fiction, tells us of the ill effects of bad choices. So we've heard about it, Shrutabhyam, Dristam. We've all had friends who didn't care to curb their illicit tendencies. My brother, for instance, Bo, passed away in his late 40s, died extremely prematurely because from the age of 10, he used to smoke cigarettes. As soon as he could drink, the age of 12 or 14, if it was prohibited, he would do it. He was like a surface-to-air missile. If my parents, the teacher said no, that's what he was going to do. When someone said no to him, he heard yes. And I've seen with my own eyes how at the age of 48, he had lung cancer. And then he also was addicted to drugs and alcohol and so many things. Did not have a happy life, but at the same time, how could he not be personally responsible for having made his own choices? I've seen with my own eyes, in the case of my brother, the injurious effects of meeting illicit sex, gambling, and intoxication. He himself also, in his life, saw other of his associates suffer the same negative effects from these activities. But in spite of hearing about it from teachers and parents who have more experience and who have our best interest in mind, in spite of hearing about it, in spite of hearing about it from the pulpit at church, my parents insisted that we go to a church every Sunday. So my brother had ample opportunity to hear pravitim cha, nivritim cha, what to do and what not to do. And then seeing, we all have friends, we've seen the ill effects. So my brother heard from good sources. We had a good upbringing, a good birth, good teachers, good parents, good ministers, plenty of exposure to scriptural advice. And yet, in spite of hearing that, he chose to ignore what he heard. In spite of seeing friends and associates suffer the ill effects, he still chose to override that and went ahead and did all those abominable things nevertheless. What do we learn from this? We learn that even if you commit sinful acts, and even if you atone for them in the proper way, still the seed of sinful activities rests within inside you without getting down deep and uprooting the very cause for which we perform sinful activities. There's no permanent atonement. My brother would go into detox every once in a while, spend a few months where he was clean on the wagon. But because the seed was still there, he would always fall off the wagon and go back to his old way. Same thing with drugs, same thing with illicit sex. Prabhupada gives the example that if you are promiscuous and you get an STD, the cure, the atonement for an STD, is a very, very painful, long needle shot. It's extremely painful, excruciatingly painful. And one says, after having got the shot and been cured, I'll never engage in promiscuous behavior again. But as time goes on and one forgets, as one gets distance in time from the painful atonement for an STD, one then lapses back into the same sort of behavior. So this verse, Drishta Shuddha Vyapam, we've heard about it, we've seen it, and we personally experienced it. My brother would, after overriding what he heard, after overriding what he saw, then he personally touched fire. He personally experienced it. And in spite of this, he would then periodically go back to it. And eventually he died of a drug overdose at the relatively young age of 49. So it is said that nevertheless, in spite of hearing, seeing, and experiencing one's own self and performing acts of atonement, suffering the ill effects of it, still one goes back to performing the same unwanted activities. Therefore, the question is asked in this verse, what is the value of such atonement? Have we come up for it? Drishta Shuddha, either Prashant or Shiksha Stakam? Yes, Prashant's got it up there. Drishta Shuddha Vyapapam Jnanamapam Karotu Bhuvi Vishwaka. So therefore, the assertion is made now in the 18th verse, first chapter of the 6th canto. Prayaschitani. Prayaschita is the word for counteraction, for atonement. Prayaschitani Chirnani. It is categorically declared that unless and until one centers one's life around the service of the supreme purificatory personality of Godhead. So Godhead is light, ignorance is darkness. Where there is light, there cannot be darkness. So where the tongue is engaged in honoring the Lord by chanting His holy names, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and where the tongue is also engaged in eating only sanctified vegetarian prasadam, which is offered to the Lord, then and then only does one address the root cause of one's sinful activity. So it is said, Prastitani Churnani, it is said, I don't think that atonement does any good unless it is in the line of Narayana Paranmutam, unless it leads to shelter and surrender to Narayan, the origin of all living entities. I think that atonement is of no value unless it is in the line of surrendering to Narayan. Example is given. In Vedic times, if you put liquor into a pot, that pot was forever tainted, forever contaminated. It didn't matter. Once having had liquor in it, it didn't matter how many times you washed it out, how much bleach you used, how much elbow, how much soap, how much dishwashing detergent, that pot could never be used save for puja or for an arti ceremony or for worship. It was considered to be always contaminated. So similarly, those who have opted out for sense gratification, who have sold out their senses, their mind, and their intelligence for temporary sensual stimulation in this material world, there is no possibility, no matter how much atonement they do, no matter how many remedial measures they take, there's no possibility of them actually getting cured from the embodiment, which is subject to birth, death, disease, and old age. Unless and until one centers one's life around the service of the Lord, that root cause of sinful activities will not be uprooted. However, once one accepts engagement in the service of the Lord, even to a small degree, even in a small kotani, mato triyate baya, Bhagavad Gita 2nd chapter says, even a small amount of devotional service can save one from the most dangerous position. Our story today, to illustrate this point, we talked previously about the story of Bharat Maharaj. We talked last week also about Chitraketu Maharaj, and in both cases, devotional service was a permanent asset. It stood them in good stead, and when they got the opportunity to intersect with the devotional service of the Lord in the future, their lives were completely successful. Now, the story of Ajamile is that he was born in a Brahmin family, as you may know. Up until the time of puberty, He was on the straight and narrow, very happy to be assisting his parents in worshiping the deity at home, arranging all the paraphernalia for the pleasure of the deity. However, after he reached his teenage years, one time he was out gathering wood or gathering flowers for the puja, and he happened upon a low-class man and woman who were intoxicated, half-dressed on the side of the road, engaged in a, lascivious embrace. And because his hormones were already starting to manifest themselves, Nevagna Pramanada Rita Kumbha says man is like butter, and woman, especially a half-dressed woman, is like fire. When you put fire in proximity with butter, butter will always melt. So this young boy, seeing this scene of lasciviousness, didn't have a chance. He got laid low. He got blindsided. He got cross-blocked. After that, all he could think about was this woman 24 hours a day. From thinking of Krishna, he transitioned. He fell down to thinking of this woman 24 hours a day. And even though his parents had arranged a beautiful, faithful, peaceful wife for him, he left her. He made such an arrangement that that prostitute was hired as his cleaning woman, and he engaged in an affair with her, eventually producing 10, 12 children from her, adopting a life of crime, extortion, robbery, in order to maintain his common law marriage and his children as a result of that liaison. He got to be 82 years old. Finally, the time that waits us all arrived. The associates of Yamaraj approached him while he was lying ill and dying on his deathbed. They had their nooses in their hand. Their modus operandi is to put their noose around the subtle body. The gross body is going to be finished. It's at its fag end, dust to dust, earth to earth, ashes to ashes. All the elements that comprise this gross body at the time of death dissolve and merge with the greater elements, earth, air, fire, and water. The subtle body, however, survives the gross body. The body of our mind, intelligence, and false ego, and it's that subtle body around the neck of which the Yamadutas place their noose and drag that subtle body away for punishment. Now, when you are suffering in your gross body and the suffering reaches a certain threshold, you die. You just leave your body. That's the fail-safe. When you can't stand it anymore, that is the point of death. If you are not dead now, if you're still in your body, as I am, as you are presumably if you're listening to me, it means that never in your life have you reached such an excruciating, unbearable level of pain that you couldn't stand it anymore. When that happens, you will not reside in your body any longer. You will exit your body, and that will be the moment of your death. So that moment came to Ajamile. He was about to be pulled out of his gross body. His subtle body was about to be pulled out of his gross body. And the subtle body was going to be dragged to the abode of Yamaraj for punishment. Now, in the subtle body, there is no threshold. You cannot leave the subtle body when the pain gets to be of a certain intensity or of a certain duration. In the gross body, there's a time limit, there's a pain limit, and then you leave. That's all there is to it. You can no longer remain in it. But in the subtle body, it can go on unbearably long. The intensity can be unbearably harsh, and you have no recourse. There's no fail-safe. You cannot leave the subtle body. So the punishments that await sinful people at the time of death are unimaginable. And then after the subtle body is subjected to all the requisite punishments on the abode of Yamaraj, then it is assigned another birth, perhaps a subhuman birth, perhaps residence in a hellish planet. So none of this is palatable, and those of us who are sober, should try to avoid any of all of this at all costs. What happened to Ajamile? He had named, as is often the case in India, his youngest son after the name of God. He had called his youngest son Narayan. And being a doting and particularly aged father, the youngest son was his favorite. And in all of his household activities, he would say, Narayan, come here. Narayan, how are you doing? Narayan, would you like something to eat? Narayan, it's time to go to bed. Narayan, it's time for your bath. Throughout the day, he would be saying constantly, Narayan, 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 Narayan. He wasn't thinking of God. He wasn't doing it in a mode of devotional service. But at least he wasn't chanting it offensively. It says, Nam Nam Balad Yashai Papa Buddhi. The greatest offense against chanting is to commit sinful activities and then to use the chanting of the holy names as a doormat to wipe off your sins, just like we wipe our feet off. And with every intention of committing the sins again. So when one takes the chanting as a means of atonement to get rid of the effects of the sin so that then one can go out and sin again, then that person cannot be corrected. It's the greatest sin because that mentality can never be corrected. That was not the case with Ajamile. He chanted guilelessly. He did not misuse the chanting of the holy names in order to counteract his sins. He chanted more or less innocently out of affection for his youngest son. Therefore, when the Yamadutas came to get him and he saw them approaching him in the twilight, he was terrified. And what arose, what bubbled to the surface of his consciousness was the name of his youngest son. In terror and in helplessness, he chanted, Narayan, Narayan, Narayan. And that guileless chanting, it is said, Namno hiyavati sakti papa niharane hare tavad kartam nashaknoti padakam patitina. Simply by his chanting the holy name of Narayan, he counteracted in that moment the reactions to more sins than he was able to commit. Additionally, from the Garuda Purana, Avashevinapida Yandamni Kirtita Sarvapadika Pumam Munchati Sadhya Shima Trashta Migrariva. If one chants the holy name of the Lord, even in a helpless condition or without desiring to do so, all the reactions of a sinful life depart, just as when a lion roars, all the small animals flee in terror. What a nice example. When a lion announces his presence in the vicinity with a loud roar, all the birds, the monkeys, the animals fly or scuttle away. Another example is if you come upon a tree which is full of crows and you loudly clap, at the sound of that clapping, all the crows will take flight and exit that tree. Skanda Purana also says, Sakrit ucharitam yena haryahi akshara dvayam bara parikarastena moksha gramam parti. Once chanting the holy name of the Lord, which consists of 2 syllables, Hari, one guarantees one's path to liberation. Prabhupada told the story of a Muslim who was out in the forest one day. For the Muslims, a boar, a hog, is condemned. They don't eat the flesh of a hog. It just so happened in the case of this Muslim, a wild boar attacked him and gored him to death with its tusks. As the Muslim was leaving his body, at the last moment he said, Ha Ram, 2 syllables, which in his language meant condemned. Ha Ram. But because the syllable Ram, Ramadi Murtishu Kavan Manatishtan, was included within his 2-syllabic utterance, he got his liberation. So both Ajamile and the Muslim chanted guilelessly. They did not misuse the process of chanting in order to justify and atone for sinful activities. Both were sinful. Both were fully up to the neck engaged in sinful activities, but they did not use the chanting in order to counteract their sins. Simply because Ajamile called out in a helpless, heartfelt way to his younger son, he was freed from the reactions of more sins than he could commit. This is the true process of atonement. Someone says, well, that's pretty cheap, true. I can just chant and get rid of sins, and then I can go on sinning. That's exactly what we're talking about. You've crossed over now to the greatest sinful way of thinking for which there is no remedial measure. And it was not that Ajamile got his immediate liberation. No. As soon as he chanted the names of the Lord, he went up on the radar of the Vishnu Dutas. Prior to that, he was only on the radar of the Yamadutas. His future was only one of unimaginable and unendurable suffering. But as soon as he chanted Narayan, he came to the attention of the Narayana Dutas, the servants of Narayan. They appeared immediately on the scene. They stopped the Yamadutas from dragging Ajamile away from punishment. There was a big discussion which took place, and at the end of it, both parties decided to give Ajamile 2 more years of life, give him a reprieve. He didn't get liberation because you can counteract the reactions of all of your past sins. But the real issue is, are you then going to go on sinning again? If so, chanting does you no good. But if, as a result of that experience, you give up sinful life, then your path to liberation is wide open. So just to see what he would do, whether he would relapse or not, or whether he'd keep in the straight and narrow, the Yamadutas and the Vishnudutas agreed combinedly to give him 2 more years of life. So he got up from his deathbed. He left that negative family situation. He went to Rishikesh, attached himself to some sages there, and did service at a temple, bringing water, cutting up vegetables, helping with menial duties, hearing the holy name of the Lord, chanting the holy name of the Lord, taking prasadam. 2 years later, when he died again, he had not committed any further sinful activities, and at that time he got an entirely different result than he would have had he not chanted helplessly one time the name of Narayan. Prabhupada says that there are many scriptures called Dharma Shastras, like Manu Samhita and Parashara Samhita, in which all different kinds, hundreds and hundreds of methods of atonement are discussed. But none of those methods of atonement are equal to the simple practice, chanting the holy names of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and taking prasadam. This and this alone raises one to the platform of loving devotional service to the Lord, who is described as Uttama Shloka because he is praised for his glorious activities. Thus, one who serves the Lord by remembering his form, name, paraphernalia, attributes, and pastimes, he is said that because of the omnipotence of the Lord, because the Lord has no limitations on how it is that he can purify his devotee, what cannot be achieved through the myriad other forms of atonement, what atonement cannot be achieved through the performance of the Vedic rituals and sacrifices through penances and austerities, sacrifice, yoga given, is easily achieved by the chanting of the Lord's holy names. Kechit kevala bhakta vasudeva para agamdundan nihanamiva bhashkara. Again, 6th canto says, only a rare person who has adopted unalloyed devotional service to Krishna can uproot the weeds of sinful activities with no possibility that they will revive. He can do this simply by discharging devotional service, just as the sun can immediately dissipate fog by its rays. Our concluding statement on this Motivational Monday to you all, Prabhupada says, to chant the holy name and dance in ecstasy is so easy and sublime that one can achieve all the benefits of spiritual life simply by following this process. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu declares, Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtan. All glories to the Krishna Sankirtan movement. It's the best process for becoming purified of all sinful reactions and coming immediately to the platform of spiritual life. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram. Hari Hari. That's our allotted time this morning. Appreciate your being with us, William Griffith. Prashant, our verse slinger, coming up with lightning speed. No sooner are they out of my mouth than he's posted them here in the comment section. Sheikh Shashtasham also. He also says back in the day, some devotees would try to imitate Prabhupada or some sort of Indian affectation by speaking in a nasal Bengali accent. He says that's almost annoying as artificially clearing the throat. Anyway, I can say two things. When I was young, I did not artificially clear my throat. But I can also say that at this point in stage, my throat clearing is not artificial. Yes, Prashant, so wonderful. Bhai Bobby mentions that my brother, in spite of a whole lifetime of sinful engagement and backslacking repeatedly, the good news is that he did join me. A couple of times when he hit rock bottom, he gave me a call, said, True. One time he was in Costa Rica and he was walking through the park there in San Jose, drunk. He got mugged, beaten up, and robbed. He had no money to his name. His passport was stolen. So he called me from Costa Rica. He said, Charu, send me some money. Gotta get out of here. So I sent him an airline ticket. He joined us in Los Angeles and he lived with me in the Los Angeles Temple, the Life Membership House, for a number of months. I was completely clean and sober, no alcohol, no cigarettes. We even made one trip up to here to Utah in which we were building the log house, which is our current ashram. At that time, it was going to be our temple, and he helped us out. I remember some of the futons that my Bobby uses next door in her room here in the basement were built by my brother Bo. We went back to Los Angeles, and somehow or other, he relapsed. There was a grocery store across the street, and some or other he would manage to get himself a pint of alcohol early in the morning. And so noticing this falling off the wagon on the part of my brother, I thought, well, we should go back to Utah because he was really good in Utah. In Utah, it's hard to get alcohol, at least it was in those days. So I said, oh, we're going to go back to Utah. So get ready, come with us. He said, no, not going back to Utah. By this time, he was off the wagon. So he was not going back to Utah, no matter what. He said, I'll live here in the Life Membership House while you're away. And I said, well, Bo, everybody in the community knows that you're breaking the rules. You know, you've been reported tipsy and smoking, so I can't leave you here to your own devices while Bhai Bobby and I go to Utah. So at that point, we parted ways, and it was a few months later I heard that he had overdosed on heroin, but he did chant, and at those times he chanted, he was free of all his past sins. However, he did not stop the process of sinful activities, and that was how he became re-entangled in material reactions. Yes. So anyway, the holy name is never to be minimized. It's always an asset in our transcendental account. And it will stand us in good stead. Bo, wherever he is at this point in time, when and if he intersects the Sankirtan movement, chanting the holy names of pure devotees, he won't even understand it himself, but he will be attracted, just like as Prahlad says, iron filings are attracted to a magnet. So thanks very much both to Shiksha Stakam as well as Prashant, who are just weighing in here, like supporting and reinforcing, underline all of my points. It's making for a very, very lively and voluminous comment section. I don't know how many comments we have altogether, but there are quite a few. And as you know, I will also reply, even if it's to do nothing more than say Hare Krishna. Later on, we're going to the kitchen now, but I will reply to you. We love lots of comments. So in the last few moments before we close out here, you're welcome to put a Hare Krishna or a Hare Bol, or give a pranam or an emoji, whatever you like, and we will get back to you. We'll also be back tomorrow with a new verse. We spent 4 sessions on this very, very archetypical verse. Now we'll move to the next important verse here in the first canto. I'll look forward to rejoining you tomorrow. Shiksha Sakam, thank you very much for joining us. Prashant, thank you for joining us. Malini Preeti, thank you for joining us as well. My Bobby is there. Let me scroll through here. Yeah. So many contributions from Prashant and Shiksha Sakam. We had Anjali also weighed in. Jai Sri Radhe, Rupa Manjari, thank you so much. Jean, William, appreciate it. Richard, Vaninath, thank you for joining us. Vaninath Prabhuji. Govinda Dev, Govinda Rajan, and Terry Berger. So that's it for today. Have a great Krishna conscious 4th of July. Declare your dependence on God, the result of which will be independence from birth, death, disease, and old age. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama,